Delighted to welcome my friend Priyanka to this Network Capital episode. Today, we're going to talk about her career, what she's building, why she moved back to the US, and a bit more. So, Priyanka, welcome aboard. Thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Utkarsh. We've been wanting to do this for a while, so I'm really excited to finally be talking to you about this.
Yes, we moved to India around the same time,
Yeah,
and since then we've been trying to do a lot of interesting stuff together. And
yeah.
I've learned a ton from the focus with which you built Falcon. Talk to me about the early days. What got you interested in coming back to India, and why did you start working in fintech?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I mean, we started our journeys around the same time. And I have also been equally inspired by the way that you built Network Capital, right? I've learned so much from you. And for me, Utkarsh, I think the entrepreneurial bug had bit me a long time ago, way before I even knew that it had happened, right? Because I grew up around, my father who had started his business around 16 or 17, right? When he was very, very young. And I saw firefighting, I saw hustle, happening
Hmm.
at home every single day. And I think more than I've ever acknowledged, my mom also inspired me very, very deeply, right? Because I think there's a lot that she wanted to do when she was younger, but unfortunately, the circumstances, in her time, especially in India, didn't allow her to do, what she wanted to. And
Hmm.
so she actually raised me up to be fiercely independent, fiercely ambitious. And this sort of further got sort of strengthened when I took a gap year after high school. I wanted to get out of the classroom. I wanted to do something more, than just academia. And I was very intrigued by the idea of microfinance at that time. So I
Hmm.
actually started interning in the field. And I think I was 17 years old at that time, and I started probably asking too many questions. And a few people, uh, would think that she's a kid. Why is she asking so many questions? So in order to actually get my story out and get the story of some of the borrowers that I was meeting out, I actually started to shoot a documentary film,
Hmm.
and that is where the idea of financial services and how it could help people move up the economic ladder really excited me. So then I ended up going to Yale University in the US for my undergrad, and all of my work over there, any organizations that I was involved in, my senior thesis, that I did on the direct benefit transfer system, everything somehow, made me lean more and more towards financial services as that, tool that I could personally use to make the kind of impact I wanted to. So that's how our story started. And, I had been in touch with one of my best friends from high school. His name is Praptej. Today, he's my co-founder. We've been co-founders for quite some time now, and we had both been in touch. And he had just graduated from England. He had come back to India a few years before me, and both of us, very strongly, even at that time, and we continue to actually believe in the India story. We were very
Right.
excited about where India was heading. We knew that there were a lot of pools that were underpenetrated in terms of problem statements, in terms of impact. And for both of us, we kept leaning towards fintech. He had his own lens from which he viewed it. I had my own. And it seemed like a no-brainer, for me to start this. And I actually started my first payments company when I was still in my senior year at college. So I made my first recruit over there, and we came up with an idea of Venmo meets M-Pesa. And for us, the rest is history. From there on, we kept going. We never wanted to stop, and we still don't want to.
Yeah, you'd written an article in 2010 in the Economic Times. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had actually around 2009, in fact, I had written an article which described my learnings and experiences from the ground when I was doing my internship in microfinance. And this was just before, the crisis happened in the microfinance industry in India. And for me, of course, I was very young at that time, right? And I may have been naive also in a lot of ways. But whatever I saw on the ground, talking to these borrowers, talking to bankers, that is what I, sort of reported in both my film as well as in the article, right? That I felt that, there was a little bit of a mission drift in the industry at the time, right? Because people were chasing numbers, right? And there was very little emphasis on giving self-sustainable toolkit to these borrowers, right? Because a lot of them had never seen loans before, right? They had never
Hmm.
actually gotten that kind of capital before, right? And so who would teach them what to do with it? Who would teach them, responsible borrowing, right? And so that I felt very passionately about, and I got an opportunity to write this article, and that's the piece that I wrote, right, describing some of these challenges I saw.
Yeah, so it's been 12, 13 years since that piece came out. You've obviously
Yes.
written at other places as well. What are some of the macro changes that have taken place in the fintech space globally and in India?
So, Utkarsh, actually, I believe that the fintech and the financial services space is one where probably the most amount of, change and shift has happened actually in the last decade. And I have been, I consider myself extremely fortunate to have witnessed it with, right, in the front row, right? And I think one of the most interesting things that has happened is that with the power of technology, right, which is what I realized when I was also in college, that I thought that technology is going to be that big lever for financial inclusion, across the world, right, and especially in India. And so what has happened, in India particularly, I think India is leading the way when it comes to, digital payments and inclusion through technology, right? There have been a lot of protocols and regulation, of course, as you also know, that has come about in the last 6 to 7 years, right? The
Very
advent of
confusing, at least in India. Uh,
uh, confusing, but also, exciting, right? Because on
yeah.
the one hand, you see the India stack, shaping up really well. You see, the protocols like UPI, like, UIDAI is Aadhaar. You see even today account aggregator, OCAN, ONDC, right? So many of these protocols actually coming to life, right? The
Hmm.
kind of shifts that we've seen, in digital payments volume in the last 5 to 6 years in India has been unprecedented, right? No country has ever seen a change like that. And, I credit the NPCI, I credit the RBI, I credit the Indian, banking industry as well as the fintechs, right, for this kind of shift. So it's been very, very interesting already. And what Pratish and I both believe is that, this was only the beginning, right? This was about setting up the foundation, about setting up, the building blocks for something that's going to become even bigger in the next, in the upcoming decade. Um, so we believe that, the next 100 million people, especially in the Indian economy, are going to come into the formal, credit space, right? And
Hmm.
that is a very, very interesting trend.
Yeah, I also feel that the building of digital public goods in India have been a huge fillip for the financial services space. And yes, some
Right.
of the policies were confusing, and I think the authorities had to figure things out. But this digital public good that is being built could augur well for the country.
Absolutely. Completely agreed.
Let's talk about the product evolution. So, what you started off in the B2C space,
Correct.
and what happened there? What were some of the lessons and takeaways from that period of the company?
So, actually, I'm glad you asked me that question because that was probably, one of our most formative, experiences, right, for both Pratish and myself. We started when we were very young. Like I said, I was fresh out of college, and we didn't really know how the industry worked, right? We knew that we had an ambition. We knew that we were very passionate about the space, but we really didn't understand regulation. We didn't understand banking. And so, we came up with this concept of a Venmo meets M-Pesa before demonetization had happened, before UPI had come into India, right? And now, I often call myself, I think of myself as a fintech auntie because I've been through that entire curve, of fintech 1.0 to 2.0 in India, right? But when we first started, it wasn't easy. We had to actually first convince bankers that, both of us as kids could actually understand something or, create that level of innovation that we were passionate about. When we finally got into, these banks, I started working with a bank called RBL Bank, which is one of the pioneers in digital payments at the time, right? We um, we realized even at that time, that a lot of the features that we were coming up with, right? We didn't know actually at the time, but we realized today that a lot of the features that we were coming up with, were quite new, right? So the problem statement we wanted to address is that we saw a lot of people, students, we saw people in tier two, tier three cities. Praptej actually comes from a small town called Rajnandgaon near Raipur, right? So he saw it from that lens. In tier two cities, were very uncomfortable using their bank accounts and using their cards for online payments, right? So cash on delivery was still very big. And so we realized that, why don't we start a concept of a one-time virtual MasterCard? And you could create an unlimited number of, these virtual MasterCards to do every time that you would do a transaction, you'd get a new card number, right? Then we had this feature where you could send money to anybody in the country with just knowing their mobile number, right? You didn't really need their bank account details. And before UPI, that process was very clunky. So we try to simplify that. We had a network of agents where you could go to your local neighborhood store or you could go to your bookstore on your college campus and you could give them physical cash and replace it for digital money, right? So we had all of these features, and when we would talk to the bank about giving us some of the APIs to make this happen, a lot of the times the building blocks were just not there, right? So we actually had to build a lot of these APIs from scratch on our own. And we actually convinced a few people, from a company called Mahindra Comviva at that time to join us, in our journey. And today, one of them, happens to be our VP of engineering. The other happens to be our VP of delivery. So a lot of those folks actually continue to be with us today as well, right, in our journey. And so that was like our early experience. It took us 2 years to just build that up, right? It was a very difficult time, but it took us 2 years to build. And when we finally launched it, the app actually ended up going viral. So the first day we got 10,000 users. In less than 8 months, we had 150,000 users, from 2,000 cities. Many of those cities I had never heard of, right? So things were going very well, and we had a lot of interest even from investors at the time to come in. But Pratish and I had this very interesting insight where we realized that we were burning money on every transaction. There was no profit in sight. We were burning money because we had to pay the cost of loading funds at the time, right? And Praptish and I both, but especially him because he's built profitable businesses in the past. We have sustainability and profitability in our DNA, right? We've grown up seeing sustainable businesses over the long term being built, right? So we decided together that, even if we had taken up funding, there were the likes of Paytm and Amazon and Google who were coming in with massive war chests, right? It was going to be a bloodbath. So we said that, are we going to be happy building a company like this where, we're not really going to make money? That's not the kind of founder market fit that, we saw. So that is where, we ended up taking the same team, some of the same technology we had built, and we pivoted to B2B, because we still wanted to be in fintech, but we saw B2B being a more exciting opportunity with respect to profitability.
Yeah. And I think that's why your early exposure to role models in life or your kind of environment people grow up seeing that shapes their views on profitability, sustainability, which is until a few years back it was almost surprising to see a fintech or an edtech company even think about profits because that was
Right.
an afterthought for many. And now obviously things have changed. But in your case and in Praptej's case, you were both aligned on that, and I think it worked out quite well for you.
Absolutely. I think that was, very, very critical. Even today, we credit that time to, for where we are today, right?
You're 100%. So you start thinking about B2B, taking some of the technology that you've built. Um, how did you go to market? What was the product like? And now I know that there are two facets to the product: the API part and
Yeah.
the other component where you build and customize. We'll come to that, but talk to me about the thought process, go to market, etc.
Right. So Utkarsh, around that time, the unique insights that Praptej actually had because he had built a business from scratch even before we started working in fintech, and he actually had to, go from bank to bank to get a loan for his business, early on, to structure, those lending products. He struggled actually quite a bit, even when he had received a loan, from the bank, a credit line. He struggled to actually get the kind of products that he needed to run his own business on a day-to-day basis, right?
Mhm.
So at the last mile, things like corporate cards, things like accounts payable automation, right, with respect to payouts, customized, journeys for businesses.
Mm,
That's something that he really struggled with. So his insight actually, because his spike in his life is distribution, right? He's really
mm,
good at that. So he understood, something very important, that in India there are quite a few banks, right, that were actually sitting on captive bases, very
right.
large captive bases of MSME customers and retail customers that they would very easily be able to give core products to. So they were good at
Mm,
giving, a current account or a savings account or a credit line, right? But when it came to actually providing modern, digitally native experiences and last mile products to these businesses, or to their customers, it was very difficult for them because a lot of the systems and technology that they were working with were legacy systems, right? And
mm,
and with those legacy systems, these were on-premise systems that were not, on the cloud, and there were no API stacks, right? So they were not very developer friendly. So it was very very difficult to configure different features, dynamic limits, create digitally onboarding, digitally native onboarding journeys, right?
mm.
And so his insight was that, there's already distribution over there. What we should do is that we should actually help these banks with technology in order for them to provide these last mile products to their own customers, right?
Right.
So we actually started working at that point with banks like PNB, right, which is the second largest bank in India, and that also journey, took us some time, right? It wasn't easy at first. We got together with our teams. We, ended up building the product in about 6 months. We had our first version ready, and from there on, we kept sort of like building based on requirements and needs, right? So that was actually an interesting time, and by 2020, 21, Praptesh's insights actually paid off well. I'm the
Mm,
founder who handles product, so I built the product with him. His insights paid off well. We actually became operationally profitable, right? So around
in
2020,
2020. Wow.
21, we were actually operationally profitable. We had a very small team. We continued to be bootstrapped because we really wanted to focus on, what we were doing, and that was going well. And that was where the inflection point came that led us to Falcon.
Mm. And Falcon is, talked about the products of Falcon because it'll help people understand what are the use
Of
cases.
course, absolutely. So today, Utkarsh, Falcon is a modern global financial infrastructure platform. And what we do is that we enable banks, NBFCs in India, as well as companies to launch next generation financial products, right, which are digitally
Hmm.
native, using APIs and no-code solutions. And we're a full stack platform. So we work across payments, accounts, lending, and cards as our four major categories.
Before you go any further, can you explain BaaS to the uninitiated and what you
Absolutely.
said in simpler language? Because not everyone listening
Absolutely.
to our
Exactly.
episode will be familiar with the product
No,
terminologies.
definitely. Definitely. So, the way I like to explain this, right, is that the inflection point, of course, that I was talking about, right, back in 2020, 2021, and this was accelerated by the pandemic, right? This inflection point, honestly, to me, felt like the Amazon Web Services moment, the AWS
Hmm,
moment, where cloud moved from on-premise to, I mean, sorry, software technology moved from on-premise to cloud, and also the Spotify moment, right, where
hmm,
CDs moved to online streaming. And so that's the kind of inflection point that I'm talking about, where the shift felt very very intense, right? And this happened because of two reasons. One reason is that most of the payment and lending flows even today in the world, right, continue to be powered by technology that was built in the 70s and 80s, right? So this is legacy code, right?
hmm,
And a lot of those systems actually, were born from a need which came about because of, cards like Visa and MasterCard rising in popularity. So the credit card had actually been invented in the 1950s. And so you needed this technology to actually process card payments, right? And the shift that started to happen is that, a lot of banks and lending companies started to realize that legacy technology, which was on premise, right, which could not talk to product managers and developers who actually run today's world, right?
hmm,
That technology did not serve their purpose very well. Their customers, were demanding experiences like a Zomato, right? Or a Spotify. And they were not being able to deliver those kind of experiences with legacy technology. So banks and NBFCs actually, started, coming to us as well as other players and saying that, hey, can you guys give us APIs? Can you give us modern tech stacks, which,
Hmm.
help us alter our cost structures? Can we lower our costs from, very high capex structures to pay as you go models, right? Can we get, stacks which are flexible, which are configurable, right? Where instead of like only having a 30 to 45-day credit card limit, if we want in real time, we can actually bring down the credit card limit to 7 days or 14 days, right?
I see.
Can we have some modern innovative products like, asset-backed credit cards, right? Can we power our systems towards real-time payments, because that's what the, future of finance is, right? And so one, this was, a very important shift in the mindsets of these banks and NBFCs, right? And they wanted to start working with innovative technology players who could actually help them, navigate the
Hmm.
kind of change that was happening in the world, right? And secondly, Utkarsh, something that I am extremely passionate about, and I'm looking forward to, this trend strengthening in the next decade, right? Is that the distribution of financial services has been fundamentally changing, right?
Hmm.
So today, your first credit card or your first savings account does not necessarily come from a traditional bank, right? There are agri-tech companies, who are working with farmers, and they're giving them something very, very special because of which they've been able to build a relationship with them, right? And so, almost sort of very naturally and organically, these farmers start trusting that agri-tech company with financial services that they may
Right.
not be able to get, as efficiently from traditional institutions, right? So they're able to tailor certain products like, a savings account or a cattle loan, right, which is sort of like procured completely digitally for their customer base, right? There are even larger companies like Samsung, which are embedding financial services into their ecosystem, right? You see the likes of Zomato, Swiggy, Ola, Dunzo, these type of companies also embedding financial services for their delivery partners, for their restaurants, for their customers, right? So BaaS actually becomes the force that drives all of this.
Right.
BaaS basically is a technology that allows any company to become a fintech company, essentially.
Starbucks is one of America's largest fintech companies, I learned
Right.
recently.
Exactly.
Evidently, 1 in 8 Americans uses their card or something, loyalty card, and makes
Right.
transactions via the app. At some point, evidently, it was more than Apple Pay. Believe me, believe me or not.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
know.
it's
I know. A lot
crazy,
of
right?
people actually get surprised by that.
So somebody was right. Like every company seems to be becoming a fintech company, and they will
Exactly.
need BaaS, and hopefully they'll come to Falcon. It's a compelling
Yes,
business pitch.
absolutely. Totally. That's the hope and the ambition.
How did you get Dunzo? What was the process like?
So with Dunzo, actually, one of the founders of Dunzo was a friend, and we were having a very casual conversation actually at a coffee shop in Bangalore, and that is where he started to describe his problem statement to me. He said that we're facing this issue on the ground where a lot of our delivery partners need to be given a cash limit on a weekly basis, right? And the problem is that we have to actually lock our liquidity for this, right? Because there's thousands of delivery partners that you're giving physical cash to. The second problem was obviously that a lot of these partners would go MI, right? Because fraud was increasing on the system because it was very easy to just take the cash and spend it anywhere and not on the orders. So, he said we've been to XYZ, financial institutions, we've been to different companies, and we're not being able to solve the problem. And we need to actually embed some of these APIs into our ecosystem in order to create a very custom journey for our
Mhm.
partners, right? So they said that, since you guys have already been working in this space, is it possible for you to give us some APIs, right? Can you give us something like a create card API where you could, create a virtual card for the delivery partner, or you give something like an identity API where you could do a digital KYC for the delivery partner, right?
Essential for
And then
banking.
yeah, and this is very interesting because there's this feature called just-in-time funding, where essentially then with these APIs, what would happen is that you'd give a 20,000 rupee, for example, weekly limit to the partner, but that money would not be loaded on the card, right? For every order that is happening on the ground, let's say that you place an order of 500 rupees, right? there would be a real-time API hit, which would say, can you load 500 rupees for this particular order ABC, right? And so therefore, number one, the liquidity was being optimized, right? You didn't have to keep all the money sort of locked in. And secondly, there would be no chance of fraud on the system because you could only use it for that particular order.
Mhm.
So that is where our team started to realize, because honestly we didn't even know at the time that we were doing BaaS, right? We were just exposing our APIs, helping a few sort of folks in the ecosystem to solve their problem statements. And that is where very organically that shift started to happen towards Falcon, where a lot more companies came to us and said, can we also solve our problem statement with your APIs?
So one is your API as a service model. What's the other? How do you customize, and what kind of customization do you have to do for the other prong to come true?
Right. So Utkarsh, basically, our approach actually at Falcon is a very product led approach, right? So we don't customize as a service element. We try to
Yeah,
actually
you're not.
reduce
You
the.
didn't want to become a consultant of sorts
We
who
didn't
will
want to
work
do that.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, what we do is that we're very inspired by companies like Stripe, of course. So we productize, every module that we have at the company, right? And that actually makes it easier to monetize as well. But what we do is that, we have two models. One model is called Falcon Dive, which is the API model that I was telling you about, where, we have a bunch of APIs across multiple products, right? It could be a card, it could be a savings account, it could be a UPI, right? And so these APIs obviously enable our customers to embed some of these journeys and experiences into their own products, right? And they get to build their journey the way they want, right? We give them the developer hubs, we give them simulators, we give them recipes, documentation, we give them the support, but they actually do the integrations on their own, right? With these APIs, the way that they want to. And the other, model that we have is called Falcon Dart, right? And the Falcon Dart is actually a no-code model where we have white label ready mobile apps, for end users. We have dashboards for admins. We also have dashboards for some of the banks and issuers that we work with. And this has been very, very interesting for us as well, because I was quite surprised actually. When we started, we didn't realize just how many, institutions in India would also want no-code solutions. So this helps companies across the spectrum because, there's a lot of folks like, let's say the India Post Payments Bank, right? Or
Yeah.
there are NBFCs, even some publicly listed fintech companies who want to go to market very quickly, right? And they may not have the bandwidth to be able to do integrations, over even a few weeks, right? They are eager to go to market quickly. So we have everything sort of ready for them, right? Where we give them the product and they white label it with their logo, with their colors, and they're able to take it to market in as little as one day if they want to.
How do you think about, or how have you priced both the models, the API model and the no-code model?
So first, basically, the way that the industry works today is that there are two pricing models. One is a revenue share model, where essentially there is some interchange income that comes on every transaction that is processed through our system, or there is a share of the float income with respect to accounts, right? So one is the revenue share model, where basically anyone that works with us actually gets a revenue share from us, right?
Mhm.
And so that actually is very interesting because that also becomes a source of additional revenue for some of these players that I've been talking about, right? They're able to expand their channels, right? And secondly, of course, with certain financial institutions we work with, there's also a subscription model,
Yeah,
right? You get paid a subscription fee either quarterly or annually for the kind of SaaS software or solutions that we provide.
it's fascinating. In India, subscription businesses are have not really taken off the ground because of some RBI norms. But I think in future, in India, RBI willing, we will see more of that happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there was a side issue that's more on the retail side where, you see the
Yeah.
credit card auto payments, but, there's a lot of innovation that is coming on the UPI front for that. So we're excited to see how that sort of solves the problem.
Yeah. As you look towards the future, getting more
Mhm.
products on board, thinking about the pricing, thinking about the markets, how are you looking at the competition? You mentioned Stripe as a company. India has Razorpay. Talk to me about the competitive landscape. Who are other entrants you might see in this space? Who are other interesting players doing interesting things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Utkarsh, this market is very, very exciting. I think it's at a turning point, and um, the funding that has gone into the sector reflects that, right? So in the last couple of years itself, about $15 billion of funding has gone into modern financial infra companies, right? A lot of that has been in the US, where the ecosystem is a little bit more mature than even India, right? And you see players actually in every vertical. You see modern financial infra players who are specifically focused on cards, or who are specifically focused on insurance, or
Hmm.
even embedded wealth management, right? It's very early days in India, but it's a very interesting time because what we believe is that the way that this happened with the SaaS industry in the last decade, we also see India becoming a global low cost producer for the world when it comes to
Hmm.
banking technology, right? And that is, of course, both because of the cost structures that we have as a country, and also because we have become leaders in a lot of digital payments and lending technology. And that's
Right.
already happened, right? Just about 3 days ago, you saw the UPI launch in Singapore, right? And so, I mean, NPCI, kudos to them, but they're moving probably faster than most startups, right? In terms of actually taking payments innovation to the world. So we believe that this is the very beginning of the curve, and there are a lot of legacy models, that like I said are decades old. There's a significant upside in terms of market cap that remains to be captured, right? And we don't see this as a winner takes all market. We see
Hmm.
this as a many winners market. And even in India, we see a few players, including us, moving very fast. There will be consolidation, of course, in the next 3 to 5 years, but it's definitely a very, very exciting time because early days, big market upside to be captured, and
Hmm.
lots of macro changes that are supporting it, including India's growth rates, of course.
Yes, competitively, it is
Yeah,
much better than many places. Um,
yeah.
would you consider yourself to be a B2B company or a B2B2C company?
We would actually call ourselves a B2B2C company, in the sense that uh, we actually never go directly to the end user. We never talk to a retail customer or an SME on our own. We always work either with banks, NBFCs, or with platforms, and the companies that I was talking about.
Hmm. And has anyone ever given you a suggestion? India is a land of crazy suggestions as well, among other things, to become a bank yourself, like become a virtual bank, cut out everybody else. You have the superior technology. Why share it?
No, that's a very interesting and controversial topic. But no, actually, the idea is that we excel at technology. That's our forte, and we want to continue to actually be a platform because we see that as being an extremely scalable model. We have a global ambition. India is obviously a great core market for us, but we have a global ambition. There's a lot to be done in terms of taking this modern tech stack to different countries, to different banks and financial institutions. So we're very happy actually working with institutions that already have a captive base. These banks that we work with, the NBFCs that we work with, they are excellent at underwriting. They're excellent at sort of knowing what their customers want, right? A lot of them have been around for decades. So what we
Yes.
actually want to do is that we want to power them, we want to support them. So we'll continue to actually double down on that strength that we're building within the company.
Yeah, Bill Gates once defined a platform as a kind of a playground where the participants, the day they start making more money than you, is the day you know
Mhm.
you've actually built a platform. So it seems to be applicable to
Absolutely.
what Falcon is doing.
Exactly. Right.
Let's switch gear to some of the challenges. So we briefly touched upon policy, but you talked to it about us in a more positive light, which is refreshing and energizing
Mhm.
because taking the long term perspective can be hard for entrepreneurs sometimes.
Mhm.
Other challenges, product-wise, market sentiment-wise, what have been some of the low points of building?
That's a very important question, of course. And as with all startups, we've also been through our challenges, of course. And especially in the last couple of years, like you mentioned, you talked about this earlier, that there has been a lot of regulatory upheaval, right, in the market, and there are new circulars coming periodically. Um, and that has, of course, I mean, for everybody in the ecosystem, it's been difficult because you've had to adjust. Even business models, have had to be sort of pivoted, right, in some cases. But but as a startup founder, as an entrepreneur, it's my job to always be optimistic. And I
Hmm.
think over the last few years being bootstrapped, I think both Raptesh and I have developed so much thick skin that for us, the moment that we hear of something like that, we directly and right away get into firefighting mode. For
Hmm.
us, the question is not, is this a problem? I think the question is that what do we immediately do about it, right?
Hmm.
And so, even the regulatory changes that have happened, both of us actually see this as a coming of age for the fintech industry,
Yeah.
right? This had to happen because there were some gray areas in terms of lack of clarity, right? And now that that clarity has come in, even with the digital lending guidelines, for instance, a lot of players are very happy that they know now what they can and can't do,
Hmm.
right? And what we're seeing is that even in the next 2 years, what is going to happen, whether it is in the Indian market or potentially even globally, is that a lot of the serious players, who want to play the long game, they are starting to get their own licenses as well, right?
Hmm.
And when they get regulated, compliance becomes even more important. So some of these players, of course, are already working with us, wherein we are actually becoming that technology partner to them in order to help them build these stacks quickly, in order to help them go to market quickly, while always complying with regulation and being ahead of the curve, right?
Right.
So so definitely, challenges abound, but overall, we believe this is a positive long-term change for the industry.
How are you building talent density within your organization? I read about your chief business officer, you mentioned two other staff, who you hired from one of the partners.
Yeah.
So what's your overall strategy there?
So, Utkarsh, a lot of our, early talent actually came from Taptej and I are huge on relationships, right? For us, long-term relationships is everything. And
Mm.
so that's why I was telling you that a lot of our team members at Falcon are actually from our early days, when we were building Kite, right?
Mm.
They continue to be with us. And, a lot of them have just become so close to us that we built a fantastic rapport, right? And that enables us to move really fast because we
Right.
understand each other so well, right? And even our CBO, for instance, Chinmay, right? He was actually our earliest champion at RBL Bank. He was instrumental for setting up the digital payments department at RBL when they were just starting out. He spent
Hmm.
7 years over there. A lot of the fintech unicorns that you see in India today, Chinmay was responsible for shaping some of those partnerships, right? And so even with him, what had happened is that we had been in touch. And around this time that I talked about the inflection point, Chinmay actually saw it from a banker's perspective, while we saw it
Right.
from a fintech perspective. And we started talking, and around that time, I requested Chinmay to actually help me recruit a team because we had raised our very first external round of funding, right? And instead of helping me recruit a team, he said that why don't I come on board? Because I'm
Mm.
so excited by the opportunity. So even with him, a lot of this happened because of the kind of long-standing relationships that we had built and because we
Right.
understood each other and we all realized that we have a very shared value system, right, and a shared ambition. Some of the other folks also who have joined us, recently Bala joined us as our VP of product. He came from Zeta. He was one of the founding team members there. And with Bala also, both of us actually, Bala and us, spent quite some time understanding each other even before he joined full time, right? Because at Falcon, I think culture is very important to us. The value system is extremely critical because, like I said, when you're playing the long game, you need people by your side who believe in the vision, who are playing the way that everyone else wants to do this, and they go the long way with you.
Absolutely. In fact, I enjoyed reading his article the other day, and I love the fact that you promote your employees, the wonderful work they do. And that's a great way in which founders can build talent density and attract other people
Exactly.
to join.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of how you're looking at hiring, because on Network Capital there are lots of interesting people constantly looking for great jobs. Many will listen to this. Who should apply to Falcon, and how do you hire?
So Utkarsh, the way that we hire is that we actually, like I said, we have a hiring process which obviously, measures all the other skills that are required for the job, right? But like I mentioned, for us, culture and values and grit is very, very important, right?
Hmm.
So I am actually, a critical part of the hiring process. I always, spend a lot of time recruiting people, especially now because, we're a smaller team and I'm able to do that. So we
Hmm.
have quite a few positions, that we publish regularly on our website on LinkedIn. We have a fantastic people ops team at Falcon, that have been with me for quite some time now. They also understand, the company values. They've shaped them themselves, right? So usually, anyone, who believes that they are fit for a role that has an opening, online, can reach out either directly to me or to some of my team members or write to us at people@falconfs.com, right? And we're very transparent about how the process runs and would be very happy to even answer some of the questions for the network capital community.
Yeah, definitely, Priyanka. I'm pretty sure lots of people will apply. Just want to switch gears now to your personal productivity. Like, how are you managing the complexity of emotions, the ups and downs of entrepreneurship? Let's start with a day in your life. I know there isn't an average day, but paint a picture of what do 24 hours look like.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for me, especially recently as we've started to grow very rapidly, for me, the focus has always been energy optimization. Right. So right from the time that I wake up in the morning around 5:30, 6 a.m. till till late night, late hours at night, right? My focus is constantly how do I keep optimizing my energy levels, right? So
Hmm.
I start actually with a couple of hours of working out. I do both weight training and cardio. I run. I love to run. I love to play squash. So that is a very, very important part of my routine because it gets me started on a very high note. And then throughout the day, whatever I eat, right, even my diet is sort of like focused on energy optimization.
Hmm.
I take out some time to, of course, meet internally with my team members. I obviously meet with customers, with partners, right? But I also make it a point to take out an hour or so, for myself, for
Hmm.
without fail every single day, however busy I may be. I definitely, need to take out time for myself in terms of, just reading, something or like watching or listening to a podcast, right? Because I think that sort of like helps me to sort of keep going, right? I understand that this is a very, very long marathon. I don't want to get burnt out, right? So I make
Yeah.
it a point to be, as empathetic with myself as I am with, my team as well, right? So that is very, very important to me.
Wonderful. So an hour a day where you take out to yourself, not doing much, thinking about
Yeah.
whatever comes to your mind. And the work culture in the organization, what do you tell people when you hire them? Like, what should they expect their 24 hours to be for the next few years that they are here?
Yeah. No, so I mean, especially early on, right, when we had gone through our 0 to 1 journey, then now we're going through a 1 to 10 journey, right? I think especially in the early years, you need people by your side who are very, very self-driven and self-motivated, right?
Mm.
And so what we try to focus on is, we like to hire people who have demonstrated that, even if it is somebody who's fresh out of college, there are
Mm.
always experiences and stories that demonstrates that, they have done that, in their careers, right? They've taken initiative and they are independent, right, in their work and in their careers, right? And so what we like to do at Falcon is that we love to hire really smart, really driven people and then leave them alone, right?
Mm.
We love to give them the space that they need to, build what they want to build. Of course, Praptesh and I are always there to support them. But we realize that every individual has their own way of working, of optimizing their productivity, of, being creative, right? And so we love to have that independent environment at the company.
That's fantastic. My final question to you is about the long-term vision. And this is something that we ask a lot of our founder friends who come to the pod. If you are wildly successful in
Mhm.
your mission, what does the world really look like? What do you think Falcon will be, and how would that change the industry, your own life, and so forth? I'm not talking
Right.
financial success, more about the
Of
landscape.
course. No, in fact, I mean, honestly, even more than financial success for Praptesh and myself, it's always been about, building something that we'd be proud of, right? And when you ask Praptesh, what do you want to build, right? He always, since he's not here, I'm speaking for him. But, he always says that I want to leave a 100-year legacy, right? So both of us, I think the reason that we continue to honestly stay together for so many years as co-founders, right, is because other than that shared set of values, we also have, this shared fire and hunger to actually make a dent, right?
Hmm.
And because we've seen this industry, up close for so many years, what we want to do with Falcon is that, we have this ambition of becoming the global modern financial infra replacement to some of the legacy systems and to power financial services ahead in a way that has not happened before, right? To open up avenues for growth for, these financial giants, to open up use cases, that were not possible before. And most importantly, to open up access to financial services to people who haven't had it before, right? How do you sort of use financial services as an equalizer in the economy? And that's basically, like I mentioned, my 17-year-old self, my 16-year-old self started with that passion, right? So ultimately, if Praptesh and I are able to do that with Falcon, we'd be very, very happy.
Yeah, something like democratizing financial services
Exactly.
for the
Absolutely.
small, medium, and large players. That's a powerful
Exactly.
vision to work towards. Well, it
Right.
was a pleasure speaking with you, Priyanka, and I can't wait to do this again in a few months, where you have more exciting news to share.
Absolutely. And, it was amazing talking to you. And we've been waiting for this for a long time. So I'm really glad that we finally made it happen.
Yes, I'm glad as well. I look forward to seeing you soon.